Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're ready to really unplug and take a hard look at how the world actually operates, stripped of all the polite fictions, you have definitely come to the right place today.
Oh yeah, today's gonna be pretty intense.
Very intense. But listen, right off the bat, before we even jump in, do yourself a huge favor and hit that like button. Subscribe to the show right now.
Yeah, please do. It really helps.
Because we are bringing you the kind of analysis that, well, algorithms usually try to bury. So you want to stay plugged in directly with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we should probably set up what we're looking at today.
Right. We are digging into an ultra-long, incredibly incisive, and just fascinating ebook. It's called Cross-Cultural Understanding Sensitivity to Inferior Cultures by Conrad Riker.
And do not let that academic title fool you.
No, not at all. It sounds like a sociology textbook, but Riker actually describes this book as a manual for cultural warfare. He literally calls it ammunition for rational men.
Which is a very specific hook.
Yeah. He says if you've ever felt like society is actively punishing your natural instincts, your drive to protect or compete, this book was written specifically for you. It's heavily aimed at men who feel completely alienated by modern culture.
Right. And before we get any further, we really need to lay down a disclaimer here.
Yes, very important.
Because the source material we are covering today is highly politically charged. It touches on both extreme left-wing and right-wing cultural flashpoints.
And just to be completely clear, we never take sides on this show. We are not here to endorse Riker's viewpoints or validate his political stances.
Exactly. Our mission today is simply to impartially report on the content. We are just unpacking the arguments and the data exactly as Riker presents them in the original text.
Yeah.
So you can understand the ideas driving this specific ideological framework.
Perfect. So with that said, I want to tell you right now, go check Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books to buy this book. Because what we're covering today is literally just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, the amount of data in this thing is staggering.
So go grab it if you want to see the primary source for yourself.
Yeah.
So let's start with the mission of Riker's book. How does he set the stage?
Well, his goal is to explore this very red-pilled analysis of history and biology. He argues that modern institutions have basically been captured by feminist and Marxist ideology.
Captured, that's the word he uses.
Right. And the core premise is that what we currently call the patriarchy is not an oppressive system, which is the standard modern narrative. He argues it's actually the only system that has ever created stable, lasting civilizations.
He goes all the way back to what he calls the Stone Age blueprint, right?
He does. And this is his foundational argument. He says you simply cannot firmware update 200,000 years of human biology just because it's the modern era.
Right, the hardware versus software analogy.
Exactly. He says no biological reality is the hardware. You can try to install new societal software like HR policies or new cultural norms about vulnerability, but if that software fundamentally contradicts the hardware, the whole system crashes.
And he brings some pretty heavy receipts to back this up. He talks about male protective violence being the actual bedrock of civilization.
Yeah, he cites a really fascinating study from the University of Nevada. They looked at skeletal remains from pre-agricultural burial sites. So we're talking way back.
Before cities, before anything.
Right. And they found that men had 27% higher trauma rates than women.
27%. I mean, that is a massive gap.
It is. And the trauma was consistent with blunt force and defensive wounds. Riker uses this to argue that men literally acted as the physical buffer between their tribes and total extinction.
They weren't sitting around talking about their feelings.
No, they were taking spear blows. And Riker says this willingness to absorb violence is basically the rent men have historically paid for the privilege of authority.
Protection in exchange for leadership.
Exactly. And then he pivots to show how modern society is completely hypocritical about this blueprint.
Oh, the Swedish military example. That part blew my mind.
Yeah, from 2019. The Swedish Defense University decided to enforce strict gender quotas for combat roles because, they wanted the numbers to reflect perfect equality.
Because Sweden is extremely progressive.
Very progressive.
Yeah.
But Riker points out the actual data from the fitness tests. When they applied the raw physical standards, only 3% of women passed, compared to 68% of men.
3%.
It's basically a rounding error when you're talking about outfitting a military.
And his point is that biology doesn't care about equality laws. You can't legislate bone density.
Right. He says we're building institutions on wishful thinking instead of capability. And he points to the infrastructure jobs that keep society from collapsing. 93% of electrical line workers are male. 96% of firefighters.
We just conveniently ignore who's doing the dangerous work.
He calls it the knowledge suppression industry. We're totally fine with men taking all the risks in the shadows, but we criticize those exact same male traits in public.
Which brings us to the Sully Sullenberger story.
Oh yeah, the miracle on the Hudson.
Right. Riker points out that Sully saved that plane not by taking a poll or having a feeling circle with the crew. He used what Riker calls command presence. He was authoritarian, he barked orders, he just took control.
And he saved 155 lives doing it.
But Riker says if a young boy acts exactly like that in a modern classroom, loud, dominant, taking charge, he gets diagnosed with ADHD and medicated.
It's a huge contradiction. We pathologize the exact behavior we absolutely rely on during a crisis.
We punish the sheepdog for acting like a dog, basically. And he scales this up to whole societies, comparing matriarchies and patriarchies.
He does. He looked at the Mosuo tribe in China, which anthropologists love to hold up as this matriarchal utopia because women control the resources and lineage.
But Riker looks at their actual output.
Right. After 2,000 years, they are still subsistence farmers. They basically rely on tourism subsidies now.
They didn't build skyscrapers or space programs.
No. And he contrasts that with patriarchal societies like ancient Rome or the modern West, which he argues are engines of innovation. He claims male competition and hierarchy are the only things that conquer chaos and actually build infrastructure.
Okay, so if this blueprint is what built the modern world, how did we get to a place where we're actively tearing it down? Because Riker spends a huge chunk of the book on this.
Yes, the capture of institutions. He uses terms like woke Inc. and cultural Marxism.
How does he define that capture? Because those are heavy buzzwords.
Well, he traces it back to a guy named Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist from the early 20th century. Gramsci realized you couldn't just violently overthrow Western societies because the working class actually liked their culture and their families.
So the revolution had to change tactics.
Exactly. Gramsci theorized you had to infiltrate the institutions, schools, media, the legal system to achieve what he called cultural hegemony. You change the culture from the inside out.
And Riker argues this has been completely successful in the West today.
Very successful. He points to universities as ground zero. He notes that diversity and inclusion administrative offices have grown 300% faster than academic departments
300%.
since 2010. And it leads to absurdities. His favorite example is from UC Berkeley.
The nap pod.
Yes. Berkeley apparently spent $250,000 on a specialized nap pod for students who were feeling stressed by microaggressions.
$250,000 for a nap pod.
Meanwhile, in the same exact school, Riker points out that engineering students who are mostly male are stuck trying to repair 50-year-old lab equipment because the university says there's no budget.
It's feelings over physics. That's a brutal contrast.
And it bleeds into the corporate world, too. He spends a lot of time on the James Damore firing at Google.
Right, the engineer who wrote the memo.
Damore cited peer-reviewed biological studies to explain why there might be gender disparities in tech. He wasn't ranting. He was trying to use data to optimize the workplace.
But he got fired.
Because the data contradicted the ideological software. Riker calls it a modern heretic burning. He points out Google was doing these privilege walks where managers were supposedly instructed to dock the performance reviews of anyone who didn't play along.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare for anyone who just wants to do their job based on merit.
Well, Riker points out that the DEI industry is now valued at over $9 billion annually. And he juxtaposes that massive industry with the fact that male suicide rates have tripled since 1990.
Man, that is a dark correlation, which transitions us perfectly into the psychological side of this. He had a whole chapter called the vulnerability trap.
This is a very controversial part of the book. Riker outright tells men to reject the modern advice to open up and be vulnerable.
Because we hear that constantly, right? That men need to cry more, share their feelings.
Riker says it's a trap. He says society claims it wants vulnerable men, but ruthlessly punishes them when they actually show weakness. He brings up Ryan Leaf.
The NFL quarterback.
Right. Leaf was under immense pressure after being drafted, and he honestly admitted to reporters that he was struggling with depression. He did exactly what society tells men to do.
And what happened?
Riker argues the league immediately labeled him fragile. He lost his leadership capital instantly, and it effectively destroyed his career. High-performance environments view vulnerability as a liability.
And he compares that to the Exxon CEO during the Valdez oil spill.
Exactly. The CEO famously said, "We fix problems, not feelings," which sounds incredibly cold. But the stock price recovered and soared because, as Riker argues, the market rewards stoicism and competence.
People want the captain to fix the ship, not cry about the leak. But what about relationships? Because women constantly say they want emotionally open men.
Riker calls this the double bind. He cites a Psychology Today survey that found 68% of women admitted they actually lost attraction to men who cried in front of them.
68%. So the stated preference completely contradicts the revealed preference.
Right. It's biological hardware overriding social software. He also scales this up to corporate decision-making, which he calls the estrogen effect.
This was the Blockbuster example.
Yes. He claims that when the Blockbuster board vetoed buying Netflix in 2003, 3 of the female board members were pregnant.
Okay, that's a very specific detail.
It is, and Riker uses it to argue that pregnancy and high estrogen biologically correlate with extreme risk aversion. He says they prioritize stability over a risky new business model, and it killed the company.
So he's saying high testosterone risk-taking is required for innovation.
Exactly. Suppress it, and you get obsolescence. And this idea of biological drives really comes to a head in his section on sexual economics.
The dating market. This is where it gets really real for a lot of guys.
Very real. He analyzes Tinder data to explain hypergamy. And the stats are pretty shocking. Women swipe right on only about 4.5% of men,
4.5%. So 95% of men are basically invisible.
while men swipe right on 61% of women. Riker sets up this comparison between Chad and accountant Bob.
Chad being the top tier guy.
Right, tall, handsome, top 5%. He gets hundreds of matches. Meanwhile, Bob, who's a decent hardworking guy of average height, gets maybe 3 matches a month.
Because the apps have algorithmically enforced this hypergamy?
Yes, the average guy is now competing against the top 1% of men globally, not just the guys in his neighborhood.
And if a guy does manage to navigate that and get married, Riker outlines some terrifying financial risks.
He calls it financial chivalry. He points out that women initiate around 70 to 80% of divorces, but men pay 93% of all alimony.
That story about Mike from Detroit was brutal.
It really was. Mike was a mechanic working 60-hour weeks. He lost 72% of his net worth in family court. Now he lives in his Dodge Ram fixing cars in parking lots, while his ex-wife uses his alimony to vacation in Cancun.
That completely breaks the feedback loop of hard work and reward. Why build anything if the state can just take it?
Exactly. So Riker asks, what's the solution?
Right, the reclamation. How do men fix this?
Well, he says you don't protest, you opt out. He introduces this wild concept called reproductive realpolitik.
The artificial wombs. I couldn't believe this was real science.
It's happening. He cites Chinese scientists who successfully grew a lamb in a plastic bag system for 4 weeks.
That is massive.
Riker thinks this technology will eventually end the monopoly women have on reproduction. He theorizes it could make child support and traditional marriage completely obsolete, giving men ultimate leverage again.
That is profound. But what about strategies for right now?
He advocates for the homeschool underground. He says if public schools are spending 38 grand a kid to teach microaggressions, you pull your boys out.
He mentioned that mom in Texas.
Yeah, teaching her kids thermodynamics by using BBQ smoker pits. It's about building a parallel system where boys can be boys and competition isn't shamed.
And building male-only spaces. Borderless patriarchy.
Right, gatekeeping. He mentions networks like Andrew Tate's War Room or MGTOW financial groups. He advises men to adopt the Reardon Protocol, which basically means strictly enforcing your boundaries.
Rejecting the idea of false equality and insisting on functional hierarchy.
Exactly, saying I will lead, I will protect, but I will not compromise the mission to spare someone's feelings. It's about reclaiming authority through raw competence.
Wow. And the book literally ends with the phrase, strength commands, go command yours.
It's a very clear call to action.
Look, we have covered so much ground today, but honestly, we've barely scratched the surface of the charts, the historical footnotes, and the corporate survival strategies in this text.
It really is a massive manual.
So if you're listening to this and you want the full picture, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy Cross-Cultural Understanding Sensitivity to Inferior Cultures.
You really need to read the source material to grasp the full scope of his argument.
And if you want to keep up with how these strategies are evolving in real time, you need to follow the author directly. Follow at Conrad Stryker on Substack.
Yeah, his Substack goes into even deeper analysis on a weekly basis.
He's tracking the culture war as it happens, so go follow him. And hey, if you got value out of our deep dive today, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the show. We are going to keep bringing you these deep, unfiltered analyses.
Absolutely.
Before we sign off, I just want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If technology like artificial wombs actually does succeed in decoupling reproduction entirely from biology, what happens to the concept of gender itself? Does the biological hardware even matter anymore if science allows us to completely bypass it?
That is a wild question to end on.
Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.